listeners, and thanks for tuning in to this MetriSight, episode 36. I'm Beth Schultz, Vice President of Research and Principal Analyst, responsible for our employee experience research. I'm here with my three colleagues, Robin Garris. She is our CEO and Principal Analyst leading our Contact Center and Customer Experience Research. Erwin Lazar, who is our President and Principal Analyst leading our Workplace Collaboration Practice, and Diane Myers. Diane is a Principal Analyst who is overseeing our vendor ranking and MetriCast forecasts across our research areas, starting first with CX, Out Now, and Workplace Collaboration, which is underway. Robin, Erwin, Diane, hello.
Hello, Beth.
Hey, Beth.
So the four of us were in Orlando last week attending Enterprise Connect, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners were there as well. We wanted to take a little bit of time today via this MetriSight to share some of our top takeaways. I want to start with generative AI. Now, thanks to OpenAI's ChatGPT announcement back in the fall, the buzz around generative AI is really been hot and heavy of late. We started well before Enterprise Connect, but I think, as expected, I think we can all agree that, this continued to be one of the hottest discussion points of the event, across the board, whether you were talking exhibitors or speakers or attendees, everybody wanted to, share their thoughts on what's happening with ChatGPT and generative AI in general. And what does it mean for them? So guys, let's start with, what were some of the more interesting or intriguing things you heard around the use of ChatGPT or generative AI in general? Robin, you want to get going with that answer?
Pretty much everything I talked to vendors about when it came to ChatGPT or just generative AI was pretty much similar. I mean, everyone was kind of doing the same thing. It was either around, content development, classification, summaries of calls, things like that, which are all really good uses of generative AI. But, most companies had some sort of announcement, and all the announcements were fairly similar. There were some that were long before the show, like Cresta, but you had Ring Central, you had Zoom, you had NICE. There were several that had generative AI announcements. I think some might have been a little bit more heavily focused on the analytics piece of it, what can we do with this information, whereas others were pretty basic, like let's do summaries of calls, things like that.
Robin, I'll build on that from what Robin said, right? It was a lot about the auto summarizations and the transcriptions. Yeah. And I think what was interesting to me, especially for within the CX realm, right, which was to take the transcription or the summary and have GPT kind of just boil it down to 2 or 3 sentences, right? And that would then be posted in the CRM. And you can really see how that would be of value, right? You can't have pages of transcriptions, but what are the 3 key takeaways, and using GPT to do that, but also then to create some heat maps about what customers are talking about, right? And then rolling that back in onto the product side or to the larger, wow, are we getting the same complaints or the same issues, and being able to really to identify those in a quicker time, right? Using GPT and some other tools.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point because it ties into a discussion we had with a client yesterday, which is that idea that, okay, as GPT becomes prevalent within different applications, and like Robin mentioned, everyone had a GPT announcement of some sort last week, which in itself is really amazing that everybody realized how valuable the technology can be and rushed to get something out to market. But now you have that potential to start to develop data analysis from the data, from the meeting notes, from the documents that are being written, the emails that are being sent. So it creates now a challenge for organizations. And we'll talk about security and compliance in a minute. Certainly that's an issue, but also that issue of how do I build a collaboration environment that allows me to tap into all of that data? And if I'm a scenario where I'm using vendor A for calling, vendor B for meetings, vendor C for document collaboration, and they all have their own ChatGPT or generative AI based on GPT capabilities, how do I mine that data and pull it in? And so we're not really there yet, and it's causing, I think, organizations to say, maybe I need to go with a single provider, single platform, so that I can mine and gather insights into all of that data versus having it stored among different vendor solutions.
Yeah,
I do think Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I do think we saw that sort of value coming out in Microsoft made its Copilot announcement. And I mean, that's really about being able to pull in all the data across the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And that could really give a company, I think, a competitive edge if they're living within that environment. Diane, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
It's kind of along the same realm, not specific to Microsoft, but it's really taking all of that information and what can you do with the data exploration and the analytics. And that's really where I think the higher value becomes, right? So it's not just the GPT or the AI. It's now what can we do on the analytics side with all that data.
Well, and I think that leads us, that kind of leads us into the question about just, how game changing will generative AI be for both on the customer experience and on the workplace collaboration side. And, when is this going to get real? Because so much of this is still a bit theoretical and, we haven't heard a lot of concrete details in terms of availability, pricing, and so on.
I think a lot of it, I think it's already real in a lot of ways. I think companies have been using it for a while, but not really promoting it. It just kind of, mushroomed in the last, couple months as far as getting a lot of mainstream coverage. But so I think for those core areas that I talked about, like classification, summarization, content development, I think that that's already here, and you do see people using it. What I think is going to be interesting, and what will really matter to businesses anyway moving forward, is to be able to put like borders around the data collection, so that if you put in a prompt, it's not looking at the entire internet, it's looking at your knowledge base. And I think that's sort of really where the vendors need to go to serve customers now. So if you think about being able to use a generative AI with self-service, you don't want the question that somebody puts in to look everywhere on the internet. You want it to be able to just look in your knowledge base and really come up with some good, like if you're asking about a product, in my knowledge base, I've got 10 different articles on a particular product. It would be great for generative AI to deliver a response that summarizes all those 10 articles, and you can drill down from there. But, I did a session at Enterprise Connect on knowledge bases and, self-service knowledge bases. And, probably within about 20 minutes, we were all talking about generative AI. It was a panel with NICE, Salesforce, and Five9. A great panel, actually. And the audience was very, very much engaged. And one of the things that one of the panelists said that I thought was really important from Five9 actually was that the generative AI or ChatGPT is trained on language, not on truth. I think we have to keep that in mind, as we use it. That yes, it's trained on what's the next logical words that would be said or written, but though we don't know if those are truthful, and so I think we have to really be careful about that. And that's why I think those borders around the data collection, where you're getting the data, become more and more important moving forward. As long as your knowledge base is truthful, and hopefully you have a single source of truth, then what generative AI returns will be truthful as well. But when you get out into the overall public internet, I mean that gets to be hard because we don't know if it's truthful.
And Beth, you hit on a good point, which was the pricing. And I think that came up in almost all my conversations around generative AI or AI, because a lot of these companies are like, look, it's not free, right? I mean, they have a lot of development going on. There's still a lot of things going on that costs the company, right, who are offering these things. So everyone said they were still researching and trying to figure out how to price and package a lot of these capabilities. But there will have to be a cost to customers.
Yeah, and I think you see that already with, Microsoft Teams Premium as an example, which uses generative AI for capturing meeting notes, that's an additional license fee. So, yeah, I think you can expect to see that vendors are going to try and monetize this because they have to until it becomes table stakes and everybody delivers it as part of their offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, Robin, about that single source of truth or being trusted, the data being trusted, there has to be, at least for now, there has to be a human in the process, right? You have to serve up these summarizations, and somebody's got to be reviewing them. And hopefully, Oh, I was just saying, and hopefully it doesn't become, as these get more automated and people get more familiar with them, we hope that they are really paying attention and monitoring for accuracy and truthfulness and, phrasing and everything else. So.
At least for the next 6 months at the rate of development. I mean, you look at, GPT-4 is already out now. 5 is probably not far away. If you read Ray Kurzweil, he always talks about the accelerating rate of change. It'll take us 100 years to get to GPT-3. It'll take us 6 months to get to 4 and 90 days to get to 5. So, it's the rate of change is going to be very difficult for organizations to keep up with, I think, going forward.
I think, the only thing I would also add about GPT, I know we've probably talked this to death, is that I do get concerned about the use of this in the academic realm. I've already talked to people in college who are already using this and getting A's on all their assignments that they have to write a paper on. Now, what happens when the final comes and you have to take a test and you haven't really done much of your work? I worry that it's going to stifle creativity, especially in the student population, stifle creativity and stifle just the ability to think critically and logically, because it's so easy just to do these prompts and, you're in a bind and you have to get a paper written. And so that there are certainly some concerns. I know I'm getting a little bit off topic to, the tech world, but I think it will spill over to just business life in general over the next few years as we see, people using it more and more in the educational setting. And over the long term, what does that do to our brains? What does it do to our ability to think critically, logically, be creative, not only in writing, but in painting and poetry, and other in the arts, and what happens there. So it's kind of, it's kind of good and bad. There's good and bad to the whole generative AI.
Yeah, I think we're in the hype cycle right now where people are thinking about all the good things it can do, but you're exactly right. And, the potential for disruption. I saw some demos the last couple of days of GPT-4 writing complex video games. The idea that coders sit down and develop code might be something that'll be foreign to us a year from now, and GPT-5 or 6 are out, and we can just have it do all of our coding for us. So I think we're not really thinking yet about just how disruptive this is. We're already seeing some backlash. There was Italy has banned the use of GPT in the last few days. There was a letter out last week that got a lot of publicity because Elon Musk was one of the signatories saying, hey, we need to stop AI development for 6 months and figure out what we're doing. That's obviously not going to happen. But, maybe at next year's Enterprise Connect, we'll be thinking about how is this going to completely disrupt what we think about from a day-to-day type of job, whether it's development, administration, management, and so on.
Maybe ChatGPT will have written all of the stories before Enterprise Connect, before we get there, of what's happening at Enterprise Connect. No, just joking.
It certainly will have written a lot of presentations.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's move beyond generative AI. Certainly not the only topic at Enterprise Connect. What else has stood out to you guys in terms of maybe interesting announcements or trends or themes that you heard about?
I can go first. For me, it was compliance and security. The fact that a company like Theta Lake, who was a relatively newcomer to Enterprise Connect, was one of the co-winners for overall Best in Show for a compliance solution that helps companies deal with virtual whiteboards if they're using the Mural application. That was something, if you think about the legacy of Enterprise Connect being, voice and UC focused, contact center in more recent years, to have a compliance vendor that's focused on virtual whiteboard be one of the overall Best in Show winners, I thought was really interesting. We did a session Monday morning at 9 a.m., which is usually, kind of a quiet time for the conference, but we had a pretty full room. And we were looking at how communication, collaboration, security is evolving. A lot of the focus for the last 20, 30 years has been around toll fraud and preventing, more recently, SIP-based attacks. But now you've got all this content being generated in your applications, whether it's meeting transcripts or recordings, video that people are creating on their own, the use of team and messaging applications. And all of that now, companies are in reactive mode and trying to figure out, well, how do I secure this? How do I deal with governance and compliance? Here in the U.S., we had last year, Wells Fargo was fined, I think it was $2.2 billion by the SEC because employees were using WhatsApp to engage with customers outside of any compliance controls. So that kind of created a wake-up call where people said, what, maybe we need to think about security and compliance in our communication collaboration strategy a little bit more seriously than we were in the past. So to me, that was one of the big takeaways.
Yeah, and Erwin, that came up in some of my meetings, because I was meeting with a lot of SIP connectivity providers, right? So they're doing direct routing, Operator Connect if they're a Microsoft partner, but even into Zoom environments and WebEx environments. And it kept coming up, right? Which was, how can you stand out, and how can they create some of that at the, really at the network level, right? How can they do a better job of, the fraud, the robocalls, and then even the compliance things around, emergency services. And it was definitely top of mind in a lot of the meetings I had.
I also thought it was,
Robin, what about you?
again, a lot of what I cover in the CX world was to our previous discussion about AI, but I thought Bandwidth had a really interesting announcement, and also won in the Best of Show competition, and that was their Maestro, announcement, which was pretty interesting. And I see this as a broader trend, which is basically being able to put more into a cloud network platform, sort of an independent cloud network platform, and they're really focusing on voice communications, but there's other things too. So it almost like decouples some of the functions that you might already put into a UCaaS, CCaaS, CPaaS provider, and put it independently in the network, so that if you're going to switch providers, that the functions that you have, like workflow automations or your SBC, things like that, you can just kind of point to a new provider. And I thought that was interesting. I thought that the ability to move some of those functions into the network helps from a security and compliance standpoint. It helps keep bad traffic off out of your contact center, let's say. And the network can kind of find that and pull it out. So anyway, I thought that was a really interesting announcement. And I think that we're going to see more and more of this type of like architecture, this type of composability, where you're doing more in the network, in an independent network, than you are on all of the different applications, all the different as a service applications that can feed into that network. I think it just gives the enterprise a lot more power and flexibility to do what they want.
Now, I know from my perspective, I kind of went into the show looking for, what's happening with employee experience. And certainly we've seen companies like Cisco, Microsoft, and encourage people to sort of pull out the behavioral insight data from a team, their team collaboration apps or their meeting environments. Led a great session on this. Really some interesting things. And you guys mentioned Theta Lake and Bandwidth winning Best of Show. Vyapta won Best of Show for Employee Experience Management, and they introduced a new user experience score. And you can use this to do things like look at meeting patterns against in benchmarking, identifying time that employees are losing due to problems that are avoidable if you just take a look. And then, of course, understanding engagement and inclusivity in meetings, and that's something that, as I mentioned, Cisco and Microsoft are doing with their collaboration insights products as well. And then also Unisys was on that panel too, and they have this whole idea of employee, don't just look at a service level agreement, look at an experience level agreement. And that's something that, I wish more people would start to take a look at. I'm really encouraging some good optimization around employee experience. Okay, with that said, anything else that you guys, or rather anything that you guys expected to hear about but didn't?
I'll jump in there too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about the overall state of the industry. It's obviously been a rough, 6-8 months. Almost every vendor who was there that's been around a while has laid people off. The growth rates are certainly not what they were, as companies were moving into hybrid work or remote work, now hybrid work early in the pandemic. So I think that was, kind of missing. How do we... What are the future growth areas? What are the prospects for turnaround? I think it was, still, like we talked about quite a bit around ChatGPT, and even some more of the tactical issues around, voice connectivity and so on. So I think that was one where, I don't know if people just don't want to deal with it, or, it just didn't really come up in a lot of the discussions we saw, or I saw.
Yeah.
I'll throw in one more. Go ahead, Robin. Yeah, I was just going to say, I throw in one more, and that's cloud migration. At least in this panel that I participated in on Thursday, which was on a bunch of analysts, and it was on the future of IT. Nobody mentioned cloud and the cloud
Yeah.
migration. And in terms of when you're talking about the future of IT, I don't think you can overlook the cloud discussion. There's still a lot of stuff on premises. A lot of companies are still struggling to figure out their strategies for moving everything into the cloud, or some stuff into the cloud, or everything into the cloud. So that was kind of surprising that sort of definitely took a backseat to generative AI, I think in particular.
Yeah,
But you're right.
I would have thought. I probably would have thought I would have heard a little bit more on workflow automation. I know Five9 had an announcement about workflow automation, how it's standard in their products now, but workflow automation has been such a big issue, and not an issue, but just a good benefit of in the CX world. And I thought that we'd see a lot more like really cool things with workflow automation, but I think generative AI just kind of pushed it aside this year in the CX world. That, and to me, analytics is another one. We did hear some discussion about analytics, just like customer facing analytics, for example. I did a session on that actually, but it was always in the context of generative AI. So I just think that there's so much more going on and happening in analytics, and how companies are using customer data to improve their employee experience. So doing things like improving workforce optimization, workforce management, that type of thing. Zoom had an announcement around that too, around just partnering with Calabrio for WFM. There was some about that, but I thought I would have heard more on that.
Okay, any other takeaways that we missed before we sign off, guys?
I'd say there was some really interesting startup vendors there that are focusing on recreating the workplace for hybrid and remote workers. So we've seen a company was not there with companies like Rome. We saw the Huddles announcement from Zoom. There were a couple I have in my notes here. Companies like Bozu, BOZU, Jugo, JUGO, that are trying to create this place where you get to your virtual office in the morning, you can see who's in, you can quickly have an informal chat with them, you can escalate to a meeting, you can sit in a team space, all the kinds of things that typically happen when you work within a physical office. So I think that's kind of an interesting area to watch, because it's adding yet another element around the collaboration tools that today are very much associated with specific roles or tasks. So I have my team space, I go into my meetings, but this is creating like an overarching, almost virtual workplace. So I think that's an area I'm going to continue to look at over the next 6 months to a year.
I saw an interesting product demo around that idea, but it was audio only, and it was from Radisys, and they're calling it Impromptu. And it's kind of a huddle, like a Zoom Huddles type of feature. But their point is, why video? We have too much going on with video already. Let's just keep these very quick and casual audio conversations. So something to think about.
Yeah,
I was surprised that there wasn't as much discussion around APIs. I mean, it wasn't that there was, right? There was still API discussions, but it was not front and center like it had been in years past. But I did, it came up in a lot of my meetings, which all the convergence of UCaaS, CCaaS, CPaaS, right? And, and we're hearing that in our studies too, right? That companies are looking for maybe not best of breed anymore, but all-in-one vendor solutions, right? To go for efficiency and just ease of use and management. Nothing great and future looking, but that was definitely, kept coming up in, multiple conversations I had.
It kind of speaks to the point Robin was making about workflow automation a bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me here today, and I want to thank our listeners. Please do look out for more of our insight from Enterprise Connect in Metro Notes that we'll be publishing shortly, and watch for our upcoming research for the second quarter. This includes our 2023 Workplace Collaboration Vendor Ratings and Market Forecast from Erwin and Diane, Robin's annual CX Transformation Research Study, and my research on employee experience and workplace engagement. And don't forget to visit us on our newly designed website, Metrigy.com. Till next time, take care, everybody.